Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, and we've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni to network and connect with their fellow alumni, and a lot of other different things as well, related to career services and different resource partner opportunities. But this show is all about we interview former college and professional athletes, and we talk about their journey and their transition out of sports into entrepreneurship and successful business leadership. And the idea is to teach and inspire athletes that there is, in fact, life after sports. So excited today. We have Chris Soulier on with us. How you doing today, Chris?
Real good, Rob. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. So Chris was a baseball player growing up. He went to Faulkner Junior College. He played baseball there, played a little pro baseball after that, but ultimately he got out and he started a career in masonry, started his own company, had that entrepreneurial bug. And while he was doing that, he was also coaching baseball to youth, high school and some college. And ultimately today, he's still coaching, but he's also has his own consulting company. So first question, Chris, is I always talk about growing up playing sports. How did that shape you leading up to college?
Well, I think the biggest way it shaped me, Rob, was it taught me about having a perspective between success and failure, and knowing that it doesn't exist for very long if you allow it to. So really just taught me how to, work through some of that adversity, collect those experiences and just move on to the next steps.
Okay, great. And then, so one of the big things we talk about, I mentioned about transitioning out of sports, what we're talking about on the show. What was there education when you were in school, or are you seeing, because you're working with, some athletes now, education on what's next, and whether it be financial literacy, mental health, was there any of that when you were at school or that you see today?
No, honestly, there was minimal, but there was obviously some existence in career guidance. But just having the blessing of being a college athlete and being exposed to a fantastic coach, and he essentially was very pivotal in offering some of that guidance and what to expect, and that to me created the awareness that there are people that you can tap into as mentors, as coaches, and ultimately just to really be present when you're around those individuals, because there's so much that you can learn. My grandfather always said, "Learn before you have to learn." So I was
That's great.
Personally, I was very intentional in, when I was around those individuals, so that I didn't have to essentially fall on my face, and get back up. Allowed me to, really kind of move through that without a whole lot of risk.
Yeah, and you brought up some key points there. I mean, I think just encouraging people to to tap into mentors. I mean, people want to help, and a big focal point, obviously, of athletes is their coaches, and tying into them, and even as far as the programs with the schools, like I said, we talked a little bit offline. I think it's getting better, but it's still, I think once the athletes are done with school. I think there's a little bit lacking in maybe the help and education for the alumni athletes, and that's something that we work on and target to try to go in potentially into athletic departments, or maybe even potentially professional sports, and just develop additional curriculum along with various resource partners in financial, mental health, and all that. So it's important though, and I'm glad that you brought that up about tapping in mentors. So another big thing for us is networking and connecting, and talk a little bit about the importance of doing that, especially while you're still playing.
Well, it's certainly, you draw, there's a lot of parallels that you draw when you're, when you're a player, which is, communication is such a big part of, especially baseball. It's a major component of IQ. I always say that a lot of the skills that you develop and athleticism that you have, that's great. But if you're not communicating on the field between your teammates and your coaches, uh, you can fail just as much as the worst team, right, or the worst player. So, going through college, just learning from the coaches and my teammates, I drew a lot of parallels between, being that teammate and moving that into the networking space, into my business, which is, uh, just don't just assume things are going to be the way they're going to be, but to actually communicate with, potential partners, ask questions, be a little bit vulnerable. I think a lot of things that I've experienced over the years, and have caught myself doing it personally, is holding back from reaching out to people or asking specific questions because I was nervous about how they were going to view me. So, and I think even at the point that I'm at right now, I've been in business for, the better part of 23 years. And, one of the big things that I learned is to treat every day exactly the way I treated it when I was in the beginning. So I don't stop tapping into mentors, and I don't stop networking with individuals, because you just really never know where that's going to lead or how that individual might help you, grow through your business.
Yeah, and it's I try to do talk a lot about networking. It's very important to me, and just wanting to help people too, and be intentional about it. I think even going back to like high school, like to understand. I mean, you've got your coaches, and then you've got maybe parents of your
Mm-hmm.
friends that are willing to help. And I think just it's be a sponge on that when it comes to networking and connecting, because all along the way, even when you're in college, you're going to have the opportunities to meet different people. And I think what happens sometimes, and I was talking to an agent, is that sometimes the athletes become so focused on the game and playing, which is important and great, but then maybe missing out on some of these opportunities where in the future can really help them out. And so while they're playing is they're still relevant, and so it's in the importance of doing it while you're playing is because you're relevant. People know, okay, you're baseball, football, basketball player, runner, whatever you are, to do
Mm-hmm.
that. So yeah, that's definitely good advice. And then one of the other things that we always talk about and is alumni engagement, and obviously Alumni Direct. That's something that's important to us. But talk a little bit about alumni engagement. When you were at school, were there alumni coming back, working specifically with other athletes?
You know, very minimal, to be completely honest. But I did experience a little bit, while I was there. One of the I was able to play with some of my teammates had brothers that had played at the next level, and or were playing at the next level, and were very successful. And we had opportunities where they would just show up on campus, and just to visit. And we had those opportunities where they would show up to practice, and or where I played at Faulkner, there was we had a lot of team success, and the head coach was just a fantastic individual. Had a lot of lifelong success, not only personally, but with a lot of his players. So there would be times when we'd have 3, 4 scouts at practice, and that allowed us to engage with them. But I think, to me, from myself individually, it was to really pay attention, really to listen, so that I could gain perspective. And that's what I teach my players now that I work with, is number one, have perspective. I just really pay attention to what's going on, because what you're doing now, within the sport, within college, it is going to carry over into your business. It's going to carry into your life in so many different areas.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. That's important to do that. So let's talk about every once in a while, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I want to talk a little bit about NIL, name, image, and likeness. And, obviously both of us, we weren't around when that started. I mean, I guess there was another form of that in boosters, but give me, especially because you're working with some of these athletes that are, high school and college athletes. What's your perspective, both the positives and negatives?
I it's rare that I find a negative, to be honest with you, Rob. So, um, the one negative I think that can arise within that is that it ends up being a little bit more of a soundbite, and they feed in. Athletes have or anyone really can have a tendency to just get kind of, it creates too much of an attachment to me, which then carries into that I'm defined. The athlete in me, or the college athlete in me, ends up defining who that person is, and doesn't allow them to release themselves from maybe that failure. Again, you get out, you have this expectation, maybe you have an injury, and now everything that you were doing, pre-injury, ends up defining you, and doesn't allow you to actually move on. But I would say the positive, that I mean, there's a lot more positives, I think, within that, with the NIL. But and the biggest one for me is that it allows you, that individual to really experience what networking can look like, because it's it's really putting yourself out there, and that's what it takes really to go from athlete to entrepreneur is you have to be a little vulnerable. You really got to get out there and get after it, and show who you are, and have some faith in yourself. So
Yeah,
that's what I look at it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I actually have another podcast called NIL for You, and we talk about more on the education side. And you're right. I mean, one of my co-hosts on that, Trent Clark, talks a lot about. He's got an organization. His company works with mostly high school athletes and their families, but kind of teaching, hey, you have to set up an LLC. You're going to have to pay taxes, and to your point, it gives you an opportunity. You're creating a business, when you're in high school or college,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that's going to parlay into, like you said, to your future entrepreneurship, which is great. I think the only negative that I always come up with a little bit is just maybe the lack of education, because again, not knowing that, you hear kind of horror stories about people maybe not knowing they have to pay taxes. There was one story where this guy, he got a large NIL deal, and him and his friends spent the money, which is okay. But what happened was it brought the family's financial status higher, to where this kid also lost his full scholarship.
Mm.
And something like that should never happen. It's just it's unfortunate, and that's the maybe one of the drawbacks. But I mean, there's opportunities to correct it. Obviously with education. So this is a fun twist that I've added in to more recent podcasts. So, what advice would you give to freshman Chris?
Wow, that's a great question. As a freshman, if I was to reflect back, is to um, do things in moderation. Um, you know, and the second part of that is to treat success just like you would treat failure, because as a freshman, quite frankly, you're just going to fail a lot unless you're completely lucky, right? You're going to fail if you're an athlete. You're going to fail on the field, um, because you might have went from just this fantastic, great high school athlete. You step on the field with other college athletes. They're the best. They were the best at their high school. So you're going to experience a lot more failure. And I always say treat your successes and failures the same. Let them go in one ear and out the other, if if you will, right? Enjoy it for 30 seconds and move on. Just like failure, let it go, um, and have some moderation. I mean, this is the first time you've ever been on your own, and I have this consistent conversation with all of the athletes. I've placed just over 50, or I should say I've been involved with about 50 college athletes, moving them on. into into their sport that they love. And that's one of the things I would say is, this is the first time you're on your own. Have some moderation, and don't do everything all at once. Don't get caught up in the things that you can get caught up in.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then I guess the next question would be, what advice would you give to Chris upon starting your in your case it was your second year, before you got into professional baseball.
Mm. Um, yeah, I would say the biggest thing for me, Rob, or the biggest advice that I would give is to not get anxious. And I know that's the hard to accept and easy to say, but um, is know that you don't have to have everything figured out within that first year or even within that first 3 to 5 years. I would use my first 3 years exactly the way I experienced it, which was, just let life happen. Be open, and be open to new opportunities. Take a look at what those opportunities are, and don't just get stuck in one path, because you might be missing a part of that that space and time.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that for sure. So let's talk a little bit about so I guess in a sense, if you had maybe two transitions, because one would have been you're transitioning out of like playing college ball into professional ball. So
Hmm.
maybe talk a little bit about that, and then then we'll talk. Part two would be just the transitioning out into the next stages of your career.
Yeah. Well, that's yeah, that one's very clear to me. It was they talk a lot about it now. There's a lot of studies around the Superman pose. Is is to stand firm in this Superman pose, and it really establish your posture when you're going into something. And I don't mean that in a cocky way by any means. What I mean it as um, is to know and trust in everything that you've experienced, everything that you've learned, all the work that you've put into something. All the determination and motivation, that you've put in, the commitment, the preparation, and have a solid posture. Don't be afraid to go in and fail, and more importantly, don't be afraid to succeed. I think that's one of the things that one of my first manager told me was, don't you dare be afraid to succeed, because that's what rookies do. And I thought, wow, that's a different perspective. And I still, how many years later, uh, 27 years later, I still remember that exact quote. So, um, that's one thing that I would say.
Yeah, I like that. That's great. Don't be afraid to succeed. That's and then so once you then you played some pro ball, and then ultimately you talked about you started you getting out, transitioning out to into the business world of starting a business, and getting into masonry space. So how was the transition from now you're kind of, I mean, you're not done with baseball because you're still coaching, but you're done playing baseball. Like talk a little bit about that, and maybe some of the challenges, and then advice that you give to fellow athletes once they're done with their sport.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I was scared to death, man. Um, when I started my first company, I was scared to death. But the one thing I recalled was, okay, it's a lot like sport. I remember, my coach said, because of your arm, I'm going to put you at third base. Well, I had never played third base in my life. I had only played short and second base, and and I threw in high school off the mound. And you know, the perspective that he gave me was it's just a different location on the field with, you know, and maybe it's a little bit of a different IQ, because it's a different position. So um, you know, you prepare yourself to work on certain things whenever you take on a new position. And that's the way I looked at business. So once I was able to kind of pull back and reflect on some of the experiences I had as an athlete, which was, okay, I need to prepare, number one, and then I need to work at it. I need to have some self-discipline. So I need to have some diligence every single day. And I have to have a plan. And not more importantly, I need to have a vision. I need to have a vision to what that plan looks like. So with everything I've done with crossing industries and business, from masonry over to some level of healthcare, it wasn't, I looked at it as a new position. It was a new third base. It was a new, just playing a different position on the field. That's how I looked at business, and it was all the same. It all coincided. So, that's how I got over my initial fear. And with every transition, I got to, in that 15-year period, I got to about 20 employees, and then
Wow.
dipped all the way back down to 4 employees because of just the time in our country. It dictated how busy I was going to be. But I embraced that period just the way I embraced the beginning of my business. Same action steps, same tasks, and same attitude, more importantly.
Okay. And then I guess like if you had to sum it up, any like maybe a couple keywords of advice to athletes as they enter into their new livelihood.
Oh, gosh. Keywords, perspective and diligence. Be diligent. Be
Okay.
diligent with every step that you have, and hold on to perspective, because that'll keep that'll that'll
That,
keep the joy in. That'll keep the joy in every single day.
yeah. So that's great. I mean, it's interesting. It looks like you've got a lot of good life lessons from the coach, and I
Oh,
think that's probably the case that a lot of athletes.
I was very lucky, Rob, to be honest with you, with some of the mentors that I was able to cross paths with, and yeah, without a doubt, he was an extension of my father and my grandfather.
That's great. And then so is that basically kind of what led you into the world of coaching and working with youth to kind of give it back?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the one I don't know if I came up with it or where I heard it from, but I always said, it's not what you say to people; it's how you make them feel that allows them to remember you. Um, so I remember how I felt as an athlete underneath Coach Larker, and that's how I approached. And the reason I really fell in love with coaching, because he said, athletes quit sports for 2 reasons. One, it's bad coaches, or overbearing parents, trying to live through them. So I wanted to give my athletes, that essentially that safe place to enjoy their sport, and grow, and dream about another level until they're told no, which we're all told no at some point. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I did nowhere near the level that you're at, but I did some coaching, just youth sports, and coached my son and like all the different, football, baseball, basketball, little league stuff. But ultimately, coach little league and then coach a travel baseball team, and like what you said there too is just that. I mean, I think the key there is the overbearing parents. Is I'm sure you dealt with a lot of that as a coach, and I guess it's just trying to keep the kids grounded. And I always said I'd prefer to have a team of just kids that had some talent but just had total heart versus some of like I'm sure you come across some of the kind of prima donna kids that might just be more, or maybe not even the kid themselves but the parents and what
mhm.
their expectations of their kid being the next Hall of Fame baseball player or whatever sport they might be in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about what you're doing today. So you're still coaching. We talked a little bit about that with the various baseball players. So talk a little bit about that, and then also talk about your consulting business.
Yeah. So I right now I do some youth coaching, but the main part of my coaching is I'm basically a performance and transformational coach for athletes that are looking to either be at the top of their game in high school, but essentially to transition them into college. So the athletes that really want to go to college and play, I helped kind of consult around them to number one, to help them grow in their skills, um, both physically and from the IQ perspective, and also help them to find the right spot, the right fit for their college step. Um, and then I'm also working with some athletes that are transitioning to the next level after college, and what that could look like. Um, and then I've been, as part of that, I've been blessed with having this opportunity to coach some of these athletes for honestly sometimes 9, 10, 11 years. I get them as youth and transition them all the way up into college, and now I'm with some of them doing some life coaching with them, which is a whole other blessing. Because that's, like everybody, they get out and it's ultimately it's sometimes it's just the same exact thing, which is what's next? What am I going to do? Or I've applied for 25 jobs and I have nothing. So, how do I deal with that? And so there's a lot of mental, emotional coaching that goes into that, and I've been blessed with the opportunity to do that. So,
Now, are
um,
you doing that with strictly baseball players on the life side, or more? It could be any athlete.
any athlete, any athlete. Um,
Okay.
but it ends up being where it ends up being like a college, or I should say a softball or baseball player, simply because um, that's how they are led to me, is they're looking to
Right.
grow their skills.
Gotcha. And then what is it? I know offline we've talked a little bit about. Is it like on? Is it online so you could or stuff online where you can work with players all over the country, or is it more in person?
You know, I've taken a kind of a little bit of a different approach, where I've relied heavily on, um, or by accident, just word of mouth. That's I do very little self promotion, and have not for the past 15, 20 years. But a lot of athletes seem to find me through someone that I know. And there's one theory I remember from college, from marketing. It was the 1-3-11 theory. One person tells three people tell 11 people tell 33, and so on and so forth. So that's served me pretty well. And because the one thing I will say, in promotion of myself, is it's not about me, it's about them. So
Yeah.
I've done a little self promotion because of just because of that. I want it to remain about them, not about what it's going to make me look like.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's kind of like just even like with the networking connecting, I'm always about like paying it forward and all that, and like how can I help versus just what's in it for me kind of thing. So that's great. But I mean, but are the not from a promotional standpoint, but from the actual physically like working with them, or is it all in person, or some of it is online like that? That's what I was looking on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do a lot of online, work, both remote. I have athletes that I've never met, to be quite honest, and I've been working with them for 3 or 4 years. Um, so I use an app. It's actually called Coach Now. So I use Coach Now as my platform to work with athletes remotely or groups. I do some consulting, on the baseball side for a couple of college programs, and I use that platform as a means to, um, you know, help analyze, whatever position that they're looking to get analyzed and get feedback on. So, strictly do that um, from a training standpoint.
Gotcha. And so, how can people find you?
So I'm pretty active on Instagram and Twitter, as well as Facebook. So my training side is Triple Impact Performance LLC. That's on Facebook, and on Instagram I'm at 3Impact Chris. So as well as it's not Twitter anymore, but on the Twitter side.
X, right?
Yeah. So I
Gotcha.
get a lot. I get a lot of touches through Instagram. So I've really used that um, as a presence.
Okay, that's great. And I mean, people, I definitely encourage reach out to Chris, and we'll put that in the show notes as well. And you can find us at alumnidirect.com on our YouTube channel, also across all the different podcast networks, Instagram and X and Facebook. But definitely encourage people to watch the show. It is a major issue today with athletes